Hey everyone, Z-Slayer Dre here, and today I'll be going for the Platinum Trophy in Atelier Ryza 2 Lost Legends and the Secret Fairy, developed by Gust and published by Koei Tecmo. I'll also start off with a review of the game, so if you're interested in buying it, I have you covered. While I will be going over the trophies needed to get the Platinum Trophy, fortunately none of them are really spoilery, so I won't be talking about anything I wouldn't have mentioned in a regular review of the game anyways. While the trophy list is very similar to the first game, there are a handful of new game mechanics and systems, so there are a few different trophies as well this time around. If you watched my Road to the Platinum video for the first Atelier Ryza, you'll know I really enjoyed the game. I thought Ryza was an interesting and unique character, it had a great crafting system, I enjoyed getting to know the side characters, and the story, while a bit light, was charming and full of intrigue. I wasn't alone in my enjoyment of the first game, as it sold the most copies of any Atelier game to date. It was well deserved, but with higher sales comes higher expectations. The Atelier games are low budget mid-tier games, so obviously the developers can only do so much, but now with the series having more eyes on it than ever, now would be the perfect time to really go all in and do whatever necessary to improve and grow the series. Was Koei Tecmo and Gust able to pull this off? Let's find out. Before I go into the story, I do want to mention while this is a standalone adventure, you'll probably be a bit lost with the characters if you don't play the first game before this one. For that reason, I would strongly recommend playing Atelier Ryza Ever Darkness and the Secret Hideout first. It's an amazing game, and I'll link my review in the description down below for that. That being said, while I will be mentioning some events from the first game, I will not be going over anything that will ruin the story, so if you have not played the previous game yet, don't worry about the plot of that game being spoiled. We start off 3 years after the end of the first game. Everyone went their separate ways while Ryza stayed back at her hometown. Ryza is stuck in a bit of a rut and has been unable to improve her alchemy skills lately. After receiving a letter from her friend Tao, she decides to meet up with him in the capital to hopefully help herself grow as an alchemist. Before she leaves, Mr. Brunin gives her a mysterious stone that his ancestors found in some ruins. It has been glowing lately, and his hope is that Ryza can use her alchemy to figure out what the stone actually is and where it came from. Once in the capital, Ryza meets up with Tao and Boss, and then eventually with the rest of her friends from the first game. There are a few new characters introduced who I thought for the most part were really great additions, especially Patty. Patty is the daughter of an aristocrat and is being tutored by Tao and has lived a rather sheltered life. She has had her life planned out from the start and envies Ryza and her ability to be free to pursue whatever venture she desires. There's also Clifford, a mysterious treasure hunter, and Seri, an Orin who is searching for a way to heal her homeland, the Underworld. Outside of the main story, each side character has their own storyline, and while I did enjoy most of them, Patty's storyline felt stronger than the others because of the character development it portrayed in Patty. So let's go into presentation. Again, we get treated to a gorgeous cel-shaded art style. In particular, the capital city Ashra Ambard looks incredible with its large, stylish brick buildings. This is a pretty stark contrast to the island setting of the first game, and I really enjoyed just walking around taking in the sights when I first made it to the city. Similarly, the zones we get to explore have a nice variety to them, especially later in the game. There's a ton of grassy areas and ruins at the start, which, don't get me wrong, look amazing, but I found myself wishing for more diversity between the zones. I was then pleasantly surprised to see about halfway through the game, the zones started to have some different styles, especially some of the ruins and optional caves that you get to explore. As far as character design goes, again, I think Gus did a great job. I love how the main character's clothing design represents their personality perfectly, and while the changes to the returning characters were minor, I do like the new costumes for the most part. The music was mostly the same as in the first game, and while the new tracks weren't bad, they felt a bit weaker than the returning ones. Now for the story. I personally really enjoyed the story in the first game, although I did see some criticisms online about it being too light and that it took a while for it to pick up. Depending on how you felt about the first game's story, you may or may not be happy with the story in Atelier Ryza 2. This time around, it's considerably lighter than in the first game, to the point where there's really no plot until the very end of the game. I did enjoy what was there, but I do wish the main story had been more substantial. It seems like the majority of the focus for the story was through the character interactions, of which there were a considerable amount. Like I said earlier, Ryza at the start of the game travels to the capital to get herself out of her alchemical slump. She starts exploring nearby ruins with Tao and Patty, although the rest of the gang eventually joins up as the story progresses. At the end of the first ruin, the stone Mr. Brunin gave Ryza begins to glow brighter than before, Unsure of what this means, the group heads back to the capital where the stone begins to glow again and eventually breaks open. It turns out it was an egg and a mysterious creature named Fee emerges. Ryza and her friends continue to explore the ruins to uncover the mysteries of a long-lost civilization, one that's even older than the Clint Empire from the first game, along with trying to figure out what exactly Fee is. I'm hesitant to say more because, like I said, the story is very light, with the majority of the main story just being the group exploring ruins and uncovering clues to the past. A small plot does eventually form around Fee, although it doesn't really get going until nearly the end of the main campaign. It's a shame too because I was absolutely hooked on the little story that there was. It really depends on what you're looking for from the game as to if this is a good or bad thing though, and while the main story can be somewhat lacking, the character interactions are not. In fact, there might even be too many of them. Each character in Ryza's group has their own storyline along with some of the city people, and some of them can be quite lengthy. These cutscenes are reminiscent and in the same style of the interactions Ryza had with the villagers in the first game. It again depends if this is something you're interested in or not, but if you're looking to complete the game, be ready for dozens if not hundreds of these short scenes where the characters stand still and talk about various things. I actually did enjoy some of these storylines, especially Patty's and Clifford's. In both cases we got to witness strong character development and an interesting story as well. Some of the other storylines were hit or miss, and I was actually somewhat disappointed in Claudia's. I thought that the development of Ryza and Claudia's relationship in the first game was very well done, and here it felt weak and had little to say. It was actually one of the shorter storylines and it didn't lead to any character development or growth in their relationship. Personally, I was actually really looking forward to them getting to interact with each other again and the stories that it could lead to. Instead, it just led to them really just saying that they're BFFs over and over. I really do wish there was more substance to it, because I really feel like those characters could have been better developed together, but unfortunately we didn't see that. I don't want to spoil what happens in the other stories for those who are interested, but I felt like Gust really put all of their focus in the new characters and put little effort into the development of the returning characters. Not to mention the scenes become very repetitive, and with no English voice acting, they can become tedious to sit through by the end, even for me, and I'm someone who really enjoys character scenes like those. Side quests are a little different this time around. While there are some quests similar to the first game where you have to go do gathering quests for various NPCs, in Ryza 2 most side quests are tied to the job board and reputation system. There's a board in the cafe that you can take on various jobs from, being either fetch quest or kill X amount of bad guys quests. Each quest is tied to a faction, and when you turn in the quest you get rewarded with both money and reputation experience. Each faction has a short quest line as well, usually one to unlock the actual quest, and then a series of quests once you max out the reputation with each faction. And of course, going for the platinum, you'll have to max out the reputation for each faction, but as long as you visit the cafe regularly, this won't really take that long at all. I actually even enjoyed some of the quest lines, especially the bandits one. Basically, Ryza accidentally gets roped into joining a group of bandits due to her eavesdropping on one of their meetings. This questline is filled with cheesy humor and ends up being quite charming. Pamela and the goat from the first game even end up joining the group as well, which led to some funny callbacks to the first game. Personally, I enjoy cheesy humor like this, but it might not be for everyone. As far as gameplay goes, we saw improvements in basically every area of the game. Most were just small tweaks to certain mechanics or quality of life changes, but they made a huge difference. We'd be here all day if I went over every single change, but basically every system from the first game returns in Atelier Ryza 2, but with a new coat of paint along with some new additions. Combat felt much more polished this time around, and while I was unsure of how I felt about the combat in the first game, this time around I can actually say I really like where the combat is headed. With just a bit more polish, I think they have a really great combat system in place that they'll be able to stick to for quite some time. While there are still tactics levels, they now automatically upgrade to the next tier, and you can freely use skills without worrying about filling the tactics meter. Each skill can now be used multiple times to form a chain that can cause devastating damage. Furthermore, you can chain your normal attacks together with skills on top of being able to chain different skills together as well. This can lead to long combinations of attacks that can be absolutely devastating, and it feels really satisfying to pull off. They changed how core items work as well, and I found myself using them far more often this time around, since you no longer have to worry about using up your core charge and having to refill it. You can even use certain combinations of core items to do special attacks called core drives once per battle, similar to fatal drives. For instance, one move requires you to use 3 bombs together, which then adds an additional extra bomb at the end for huge damage. As far as trophies are concerned, you'll have to do each character's fatal drive along with all core drives as well. They added in a lamb at your Atelier that functions like the weasel in the first game, which made this process much easier this time around. Overall, I thought the combat changes worked very well and made combat that much more fun, to the point where it ended up being one of the strongest aspects of the game. One of the other areas that also saw a good amount of additions was exploration. While unfortunately the maps are still pretty linear, we actually got a few new ways of traversal that give exploration some depth compared to the first game. The biggest highlight for me was the addition of a mount. You get it pretty early on, and it's great to have, especially later on when the levels actually get quite large. It obviously moves faster than traveling on foot, but you can also use it to dig up special materials, and it makes monsters avoid you as well. Another welcomed addition was the rope. You can use it to swing across ledges and to get to special areas that usually have treasure chests. You can also swim now and even dive underwater. There's actually a few beautiful looking zones later in the game that utilize the swimming mechanic well. With a combination of swimming, mounts, and rope swinging, it really helps sell the ruin explore aspect of the story. It actually reminded me of Tomb Raider at some times. There were a few other new mechanics, but they felt underutilized as you only got to use them a handful of times or less in some cases, so I would like to see further development of those mechanics in future games. Lastly, for major new mechanics were the ruin fragments and memory vestiges. In the first ruin, Ryza finds a special compass that she can then use to find special fragments that show her people's memories from the past. She then uses these fragments to piece together a story of what happened to the ancient civilization and figure out their history. I have mixed feelings on the mechanics. I actually thought they told an interesting story, and it added a ton of lore to Ryza's world. I do feel like it was a good idea, but it just needed better implementation. I think they could have found better ways to present the information, because in practice it just leads to you having to backtrack to areas you've already explored to find all of the fragments. You have to backtrack because in each area you need to find 5 specific items in order to unlock the compass for that area. If that zone has 3 maps, you usually won't unlock the compass until the 3rd map in the zone, which means you'll have to run back to the other maps to find all of the fragments. Considering there's monsters everywhere, you also end up having to do a ton of battles, which can make the process a little tedious at times. While you do need to collect all of the fragments and place them all together for the trophies, you do not strictly have to collect all of them to get through the story, although a few times it is required for certain alchemy recipes. At the same time, there's a lot of lore locked behind these fragments, so I feel like people will be missing out if they don't collect all of them. I do like the idea of extra lore being hidden away in the ruins you're exploring for people who are interested in it. I just wish it felt more like an engaging game mechanic and not so much like a time sink to artificially extend the game. Lastly, we have Alchemy and Gathering, which is almost identical to the previous game with a few quality of life changes. Unlike in the first Atelier Ryza, you actually do not have to make every alchemy item, although they did add in a few different trophies in its place. Instead of alchemy levels, we now have an alchemy skill tree, and when you make alchemy items, you get skill points to spend in the tree. I love skill trees, so I was both surprised and happy to see one added to the game, although I do think it still needs some further refinement. You unlock most alchemical skills through the tree, and there's also some that will improve your gathering skills and things of that nature. I actually unlocked the entire skill tree about halfway through the game, so don't worry about saving skill points as you'll be swimming in them by the end of the game. Gathering is mostly the same, but there's a few less tools this time around. There are a few other changes to alchemy, but again, we'd be here all day if I listed them all. Basically, everything from Atelier Ryza 1 sees a return in the second game with 2 new additions, those being essences and evolution links. Essences can be used to unlock higher tier skills in alchemy loops, and evolution links can be used to combine alchemy core items together to give them special effects, and even sometimes create an entirely new item. I thought the evolution link was a great idea, although I never felt the need to create stronger items due to the combat challenge being extremely easy. I actually wish I turned up the difficulty because the game was even easier than the first one, excluding the final battle. Okay, so that's all the basics, and while I've gone over most of the trophies I'll need to get for the platinum, there are a few more I want to go over. They added a new system where you sell items to Rami, and depending on what category of item you sell, it will improve that type of item at other vendors. This was a good idea, although it can be a huge time sink to improve the shops, but at the same time it can be very rewarding because the shops can end up selling almost every item in the game once fully upgraded. Luckily, trophy-wise, you only have to upgrade one category of your choice to the maximum level. If you had to level all of them, it would have added hours onto the time to get the platinum. One of the other longer grinds for trophies is collecting all the decoration items and accessories. You can use the decorations to spruce up your Atelier apartment, and while most can be bought from vendors, some require other methods, mainly leveling up your Puni. That's right, your puny from the first game somehow crossed the ocean from your island and made it to your new Altair in the city. Trust me, the less questions you ask, the better. You'll need to feed it certain items to get the right stats for it to bring back accessory items. This is the only thing I needed to use a guide for, and I'm glad there was one out there because it would have taken forever to figure it out on my own. Other than those trophies, of course, there's the mandatory, beat the game trophies, and then there's the endgame content. And unfortunately, there's only one endgame boss this time around, and for most people, that will be the final trophy they go for, as he can be quite challenging. In the first game, we had 6 endgame bosses, so it was a bit of a letdown to grind up my gear just for one fight. Although that being said, it was definitely needed as he was a challenge. Wow, that was a lot, and I was actually trying to keep this short. As far as the game goes, I really enjoyed Atelier Ryza 2, although not quite as much as the first one. While gameplay-wise, it's been improved in basically every way, I feel like the storytelling took a heavy hit in the process. So many of the character event scenes lacked any real character development and felt kind of repetitive at times. Almost half of them were just Fee flying over to the person Ryza was talking to and cuddling with them. If you watched my video on the first game, you'll know I loved Ryza as a character, and I was a bit disappointed with how they portrayed her in the second game. They really dialed back her character, which at times it made it seem like she didn't really even have a personality at times. This took everything that made her unique, and there was little to no actual character development for her throughout the game. I really feel like there were a few missed opportunities as well to develop her relationships with her friends, but we did see some development with the new characters. It's like they put all of their time and effort into working into the new characters, which led to the returning characters feel like an afterthought. Listen, there's nothing here that's a deal breaker for me, and personally, I think there were some great moments in the game. While we know that the first game won over a ton of new fans because of the sales numbers, I really don't think the second game will do the same. That being said, I do think Altair fans will still get a ton of enjoyment out of this game, so I strongly recommend it for them. For people who are curious about the series, but haven't played any of the Atelier games, grab Atelier Ryza Ever Darkness in the Secret Hideout first. If you love that game and you're desperate for more, then go for Atelier Ryza 2. For everyone else, I'd actually say wait for a bit of a sale, but these games almost never go on sale, so you might have to wait a while. As far as the Platinum Trophy is concerned, it was another great trophy list. So with that being said, for my journey to the Platinum Trophy, I give Atelier Ryza 2, Lost Legends and the Secret Fairy a gold trophy. While again, I don't feel like this was as strong of a game as the first one, I still had a really great time playing through it. It took a little longer than the first game, roughly 50 hours, but outside of some of the backtracking, I had a blast for the most part playing through the game. But again, this is the type of game that I personally enjoy. I do have to say the lack of English voice acting was a huge issue, probably even more so in this game compared to the first. There's so many character event scenes. Without the English voice acting, they really became tedious to read through near the end, and I think this is going to alienate a lot of people that potentially would enjoy the game. I again would really like to see more open areas in the next game, and if there's not major improvements in that regard, it might actually start to really hurt the series' reputation. In some ways, this game actually felt rushed, and I really hope for the next game, Gust takes its time before releasing it. There's no need to release a new game every 15 months like they did with Atelier Ryza 1 and 2. I wish they would just take 3 to 5 years to work on the next game and really improve it for the next generation. I do hope they stick with Ryza's elite character though. While we didn't really see any character development for her in this game, I do think there's a ton of potential to grow her as a character, and I can't wait to go on another adventure with her in the future. If you've played the game already, let me know down in the comments how you felt about it compared to the first game. And if you've also gone for the Platinum Trophy, let me know. Last time I checked, over 10% of people have the Platinum Trophy already, so people must be loving this game. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you're subscribed and hit the like button. Thanks so much for watching, I'll see you all in the next video.